Hello folks, Dick Fairburn here. Talking about fighting rifle cartridges. Follow up to my series on handgun self-defense rounds. I've talked about the 5.56. Last time I talked about the 300 Black, kind of a unique niche cartridge, but very useful for what it was designed to do. Talk about another U.S. fighting rifle cartridge, the one still in use, and they probably make as many rounds of this as anything else being made. The 762 NATO, 762 by 51mm. Let's talk about it when we get back. This cartridge predates the 5.56 that most of you probably used if you had some military experience. If you dated back to the Vietnam War, that was started generally with the M14 rifle and the 7.62 NATO cartridge. So this is something that U.S. folks are really familiar with, and more than just the U.S. This was the first cartridge adopted by NATO. So all the countries that make up the North Atlantic Treaty Organization used this probably in their machine guns and in many cases in their fighting rifles until the 5.56 round came around. The reason the 7.62 came into existence was to try to improve on this. The 30-06 M2 ball cartridge. World War II vets know that one well. That was used in the M1 Garand. It was used in the 1903 bolt action Springfield before that. As the name implies, it comes from '06. The 1903 version, which predated it a little bit, had a 220 grain round nose, very long bullet. That was not current technology. That was not state of the art. So very quickly, the '03 became the '06 with a 150 grain Spitzer bullet at a higher velocity. But with the advent of the end of World War II, we realized that with propellant improvements, they could get the same performance from a shorter cartridge. About a half-inch shorter, same bullet, more or less. When NATO standardized it, it went to a gram measurement, so instead of 150 grains, it went to 147 grains in the U.S. But it's about a half-inch shorter, uses less brass, uses less powder, and fits in a smaller action. So the M1 Garand action, with very few other changes, was simply made shorter for the 7.62 cartridge in the M14 rifle and the M15. A lot of people have never heard of the M15, but that was a heavy barrel version intended as a replacement for the BAR, but it was found to be almost uncontrollable in full auto fire, so the M15 was not well known. Even before the 7.62 became a reality, Winchester introduced it as a 308, so the 308 Winchester. Couple years predating, I think, the standardization of the M14. Same case, basically. It's maybe a little bit thinner brass is the only difference, but the same overall dimensions. And it has become one of the most popular deer and bear hunting rounds in the United States today, and in fact all over the world. So the 308 Winchester is very widely thought of. Another advantage to it being shorter, most rifle actions were sized for the longer 30-06, but with the 308, we now had short action rifles, a little bit lighter, a little bit easier to use, and to this day, most bolt action rifles will come in either a long action or short action, and more of the cartridges are built for the short action that the 308 Winchester uses. The M14 rifle didn't last that long. It was adopted in '57. It was starting to be phased out already by the mid-1960s. A lot of those went into mothballs. And some of them have been pulled out over the last couple of decades. A variation called the XM21 or the M21 sniper system was used in Vietnam era, normally with a leatherwood scope mounted on it. And while they're not pinpoint precise like a good bolt action in that caliber, they were fairly effective sniper rifles. We've seen those M14s pulled out of mothballs again in Afghanistan and Iraq and used as designated marksman rifles. And the designated marksman concept is someone trained up beyond the average infantry rifleman, both for the Marines and the Army, but not really trained up to sniper grade training. So they're using some of those M14s with low to mid-range magnification optics on them. Generally one in a rifle squad. And what they're finding in a lot of firefights, or have found over these last couple decades, a lot of times that one rifleman with that optic-equipped 762 caliber weapon will account for as many hits as the whole rest of the team added together. So the designated marksman is a very powerful concept, and I think eventually we're going to see that being used in law enforcement to some extent. More and more cops are going to be trained with optically equipped, probably 5.56 caliber weapons, so that they can get on scene, they can provide some advanced rifle support long before a SWAT team can get there. The other very widespread use for the 308 is as a sniper rifle for police agencies, and still with the military, with the M24 sniper system and some others. Now into the semi-auto, the M110 series of sniper rifles based on the 762. And that went from a 173 grain load that was a full metal jacket. It was supposed to be a match load. It wasn't really all that accurate. In the 1990s, an Army lawyer did a lot of research. I was told by a police instructor one time that it was illegal for police officers to use hollow points because that violated the Geneva Convention. And that just showed how stupid this old guy was, because first of all, it wasn't the Geneva Convention. The Hague Convention discussed ammunition. Hollow points were not specifically outlawed. It outlawed rounds intended to cause additional pain and suffering. That's kind of how it was worded. And so that Army attorney looked at this and he said, well, you know, if we use hollow point loads, we use 168 grain match hollow points, they're probably going to kill faster, so they cause less pain and suffering than a full metal jacket that would just wound someone. And the other element in his argument, which allowed the use of hollow points, you know, more broadly with U.S. military units, is he said, yeah, that was the Hague Convention and we didn't sign it anyway, so the United States is not even binding to that agreement. So that's when we saw the Sierra 168 hollow point starting to be used. And the latest sniper round for the military in this caliber is the M118LR, the 118 long range. And they've standardized on a 175 grain Sierra open tip match bullet. It outperforms the 168 substantially at longer ranges, even though it's only a few grains heavier. So this is still being used in rifles in virtually all of our military branches, and it is absolutely the #1 police sniper cartridge in the country. The other primary use for the military, and probably the use that soaks up the most 7.62 NATO ammo that's being made in the United States, is in our general purpose machine guns, the M240 machine gun, and you know, if you really want to burn some brass up, the M134 minigun, which can go anywhere from 3,000 to 6,000 rounds per minute. That's another one on my bucket list that sometime I gotta shoot a minigun, but I haven't got there yet. As a civilian fighting rifle cartridge, the 7.62 is seen in a lot of different platforms out there. The one that's been coming on strong the last few years is a variation of the AR-10. Yes, Armalite made rifles before they made the AR-15, and the one, if you can count backwards, the one previous to the AR-15 that made a good showing for itself was the AR-10. That was a 7.62 size weapon. It was adopted by several countries and developed a fairly good reputation. And that concept of upper and lower receiver made of aluminum, coupled with the other components of that rifle, including plastic, polymer, fore ends, and buttstocks, it was almost exactly like the AR-15. The AR-15 was a scaled-down AR-10. And we've seen that AR-10 concept brought back by Knight Armament, I think was one of the first to do it. But now, most of the companies that make AR-15s nowadays are making AR-10 size weapons. Several years ago, I set one up for myself, an AR-10, and I chose a Smith & Wesson M&P 10. The reason I did was because at that time, it was the lightest weight that I could get. Ruger has a model called the SFAR now, short frame automatic rifle. It's in 762, but it's really scaled more like a 5.56. About the only 762 part of it is the magazine well. And I have not handled these yet. I'm still, I've got some friends that have used them, and the jury is out on their accuracy. Some report it as being pretty good, some report it as not being very good. But it is substantially lighter. A lot of the weight of the AR-10 is in the bolt carrier, just so much heavier and more massive than the AR-15. And one thing that Ruger did is they've gone to a super high strength steel for the bolt carrier, and that way they can make it substantially lighter and take a pound or so off the weight of the overall weapon. The M&P 10 that I have is not as accurate as the Colt 5.56 that I use primarily, but it's with one particular load, using a 155 AMAX bullet from Hornady, it will shoot under an inch at 100 yards reliably, probably about 3/4 or less. Sniper grade accuracy from a stock AR-10. Custom built ones with better barrels and even better optics are truly sniper grade weapons, and the military is using a lot of those. The M110 is the one that I know the most about. But other semi-auto companies that make them, certainly the FN-FAL and the Heckler & Koch G3 were military rifles when the 762 was primary weapon of NATO. And civilian versions of those, semi-auto versions of those are out there as well. We don't think generally of a bolt-action rifle as being a fighting rifle other than for sniper use. But if you're familiar with Jeff Cooper's work with the Scout rifles, these were very light, short, handy bolt-action rifles. And his philosophy was this is to put in the hands of a scout. Someone who's going to go out not looking to make contact with an enemy, but to figure out how many there are, their placements and things like that, and have enough firepower to hopefully get yourself out of trouble if you stumble into it. So Steyr was the classic scout rifle designed with Cooper and to his needs. Pretty expensive little rifle, but very light, very handy, a lot of fun to use. There are other scout rifles out there. Savage has made some scout type rifles, and Ruger as well. And if you live in the country and you're not figuring that you're going to go up against a number of adversaries, a scout rifle could be something to carry with you in the truck or carry with you in the timber, and you stumble across a problem, you can deal with it. Including 308 is big enough to handle most animals on the North American continent. It's going to kill a big brown bear. Well, it wouldn't be my first choice, but it could probably do the job with the right ammo and with a cool shooter who can place his shots where he needs to. So power-wise, 7.62 NATO, I said it equals the older 30-06, and it is just about the same bullet weight, just about the same velocity, because the 30-06 was not loaded to its current potential. It was about 2,800 feet per second, more or less, with that 150 grain bullet. Factory loads now will push that to 3,000 feet per second. So the 30-06, those enhanced propellants, will enhance the 30-06 itself. But in their military form, these two rounds are almost identical in terms of power. They're a main battle rifle. They generally do not fragment the way a 5.56 full metal jacket does. If they travel far enough through tissue, they will yaw, because every bullet has the center of gravity in the base, and unless they deform or fragment, that base is eventually going to invert and be forward. So as you can imagine, when that bullet is turning sideways, if that happens to be through a torso, it's going to do a lot of damage in there. Even if it doesn't, even if it does not have enough tissue to make it invert, it's going to strike a pretty heavy blow and displace a lot of energy in there. The 30 caliber battle rifles have always had a pretty good reputation for putting people down with torso hits. I mentioned that the 308 Winchester, the civilian version, is very popular for hunting. deer, black bear. It works up to elk size animals if you use the right loads. And I think if you limit your shots to probably 300 rounds. A buddy of mine in Wyoming who's killed more elk than I could probably count. He was trained as a police sniper, so one year he thought, well, I've got a cow elk permit. I think I'll kill it with my sniper rifle to see how that does. And he didn't do very well at all. It took him 4 or 5 rounds to get this poor cow down and get it dead. And that was not the .308 cartridge. It was his choice of load. He used his 168 grain open tip match sniper bullets. They are not designed for terminal performance, and they tend to be very erratic in that kind of performance. If he had used a good hunting grade bullet, I think he would have done a good job. So if you think you need a .30 caliber battle rifle, you're willing to work with iron sights, you may not have to buy one. The M1 itself, the old .30-06 cartridge, gives you the same power as the new M80. And if you have a Garand, and a lot of shooters do, just for nostalgia if nothing else, there's no reason they can't function very, very well. You know, the primary difference is you're going from a 20-round magazine of an M14 or an AR-10 or one of the newer semi-autos, you're going to an 8-round clip of .30-06. The M2 ball equivalent loads are available out there. They're as expensive as .308s or maybe more. There's hardly any surplus stuff left that you can find. Occasionally you can, especially through the civilian marksmanship program. Once in a while you can get some M2 style ball. A .30-06 M1 can take conventional .30-06 ammo that you might buy over-the-counter hunting grade ammo. It's more powerful. It probably stresses the action a little bit more, and the jury's out. Some people say it will eventually damage the rifle and it could bend the operating rod. Others say they've fired quite a bit of .30-06 more powerful commercial ammunition through it and had no problem. There are changes, little gas port plugs and things you can do to regulate it for a higher pressure curve. And if you're going to use an M1 with a lot of commercial ammunition, I think you should look into one of those gas adjustments. But if the M80 will do what you need for rural defense or something, and you have an M1, it will too. There's one other little movement we've seen starting in the last 10 or 15 years in the semi-auto versions of 7.62 caliber fighting rifles, and that's to go to the 6.5 Creedmoor. It's a short action cartridge like the .308 or the M80. It's quite a bit lighter in recoil. The 6.5 Creedmoor was developed by Hornady Ammunition primarily as a target round. A lighter recoil, long range. The 6.5mm or 264 diameter bullets have very high ballistic coefficients. So that the 6.5 cartridge can stay supersonic out to more than 1,300 yards. And when a bullet transitions from supersonic to subsonic, that transitional zone, a lot of times its accuracy will fall off. So staying above that supersonic level all the way out to 1,000 yards or more makes a very efficient target rifle for it. Self-defense use, I think a 6.5 Creedmoor is probably every bit as good as a 762x51. In some regards maybe better because it's going to be a little easier to shoot. Now, my elk hunting friend in Wyoming has seen a number of people show up with 6.5 Creedmoors out there on elk hunts. And in my opinion, it's a perfectly adequate deer, antelope, maybe even mountain sheep kind of cartridge. But I think elk are a little big, and he's seen some poor results, let's say. So his nickname for it is the 6.5 Need More. You didn't need a little bit more than that for elk. But for anti-personnel use, I think a 6.5 Creedmoor would be great. There is no cheap ammo out there for it. You're either going to load your own or you're going to pay the price of what it's going for over the counter. So the .30 caliber battle rifles are classic from us. They date back more than 100 years for use in the United States military, from the 06 to the M80, which is still being used, and they're virtually at the same power level. So if you need a battle rifle, one of the US .30 caliber cartridges would do you fine. If you don't necessarily need the full power of a 30, then the 6.5 Creedmoor will give you good terminal performance with the right bullets, accuracy, light recoil, and perhaps even a lighter weight weapon. So it's an alternative. The big battle rifles are being phased out to some extent. Of course, we see the United States military now. A couple years ago, they've decided they're going to go to a 6.8 by 51. Very unusual round with a stainless steel head, a brass case, and some kind of aluminum washer that pins those two pieces together. And instead of an operating pressure in the round of 50-some thousand pounds you might have for an M80 ball, it's going to be working at 80,000 pounds. And it has been adopted. The civilian version is called the 277 Fury, but I haven't seen any showing up anywhere. There's a lot of controversy about it, and it remains to be seen if it truly will become the new military cartridge. If it does, it's going to be in the general purpose machine guns. Will probably be in the hands of true war fighters, infantry folks, maybe Cav Scouts out there working with those new SIG rifles, but I got a feeling most of the Army folks, probably a lot of the Marine folks running around with rifles, will still be carrying M4s for a long, long time. So, if you need a big rifle, 762 is the way to go. What am I going to talk about next? I'm going to go to the other opposite of the 30 caliber U.S. military cartridge. I'm going to talk about the 30 carbine. Is it worthwhile as a fighting rifle? Folks, I appreciate you watching these videos. My viewership is going up, my subscriptions are going up, and I really appreciate it. So if you like what you're hearing here, give me a thumbs up, a subscription, and thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next one. Okay, we got them both here now. You ready? Bud got one. Ginger got one. Oh, she missed it. She usually gets them, doesn't she, Bud? Okay, girl, last one. You ready? You ready? Yeah! That's all there is till next time.